episode 244. Trade That Prospect. Tonight we will give you the breakdown on one-time coveted players that haven't become MLB regulars and why you should loosen your grip on prospect. So, it's time for Dingers.
This is Dingers, way more than fantasy baseball. We keep it real when we talk and knock it straight out the park. Let's see the stats, what's the average draft position? What kind of plays you making? Check the wins above replacement, check the lineups and the points. This I gotta see, what's your path to victory? Are they aiming for a dynasty? Get points going head to head, please don't do me no favors. We're always watching waivers, ain't no minor league, this is major, yeah. Dingers, let's go.
Welcome to Dingers, the only fantasy baseball podcast for smart people. It's not just Christian Encarnacion Strand that wins you championships. That's why week in and week out, we're delivering tips and strategies to help you live that straight up OG lifestyle. Tyler Childs joined, as always, by Robbie Baseball from the Murder Room. What's happened, Robbie?
Lots of baseball stuff, and hopefully I don't sound echoey, but let me know. I can reset the reset again and reset.
No, we're good. We are ready, and we got a hot mic. We're good to go. So this week we're going to be talking prospects and mastering their timelines and all that fun stuff. It's going to be a lot of fun. We talk about it a lot on the podcast about how to value these guys, when to trade them, when to get off the ship before it goes down. We're going to get into it here in a little bit. I'm psyched because my guy has been sitting in the minors for way too long. He finally got called up, and then he gets rained out. Not great, but we're here. So I'm gonna get to it. Robbie, how you been? What's happening in the world, Robbie?
I'm good. Patiently waiting on that transmission to be rebuilt, fixed, in the transfer case to be rebuilt or just fixed, and then I will have a long weekend of playing sports with my son, who got his first basket tie in an official 10-foot high net.
Nice.
I told him it's okay to do the granny throw. Like, you can go between the legs and get it up here. Kid just turned 7, a couple months back. And he got his first basket. We went to the local high school and his eyes lit up and he didn't know what to do. He was just so pumped that he got one in. And then we went over to his school, which is just next door, and spent a lot of time, and he just tried to recreate it over and over. But his version of playing one-on-one with him, he won't even do half court. He's got to do full court with me, which is just, I am not in that kind of physical condition to play full court, even with a 7-year-old, or maybe it's especially. So if he just shoots, then it's a basket. And all he has to do in order to shoot is he just says shoot, and then he gets to walk up and try to shoot. Because, I want him to enjoy the sport. And then I actually have to get a 3-pointer for it to count. So he did win the first game. But credit to me, I got 6 3-pointers in a game one-on-one. So I was pretty happy with myself. I did play basketball 5 years in high school. So thank you. OFSA, baby, 99. Just to age myself.
Wow. Okay, wait. You had enough guys in Northern Ontario to put together a full team?
Yeah, not only enough to put it. We won all of Northwestern Ontario, and then we got to go down to OFSA, which was like Lakeside was where they hosted. I actually still have the T-shirt. I'm waiting until Ray gets big enough to give it to him. And the same year we went for soccer. And it was like all the AAA schools. So we got to go down to the AA for OFSA, and it was by default because out of Thunder Bay, Ontario, they had won the year before, which meant 2 schools got to go from the Northwestern region the next year. And in their school board, only the team that won OFSA was going to get to go because the school board wasn't going to pay to have a team that didn't win go. So we were kind of walking in knowing we didn't need to win, and then we did not win, but we still got to go to OFSA. And then we got smoked because we didn't really know how to play soccer. We played soccer like kids play, hockey, and they just chase the ball. That's basically what we used to do until we went to OFSA and played against like good players who understood the game. And then we got a lot better from getting our butts kicked for 3 or 4 games. But
and for those American listeners, that's a state championship, just as a
yes, sorry. So, yeah, that's the equivalent of your state championship. So we came in 4th in basketball when I was there. And then we were participants in soccer. And we didn't have a high school baseball team, which sucked. So I had to just wait and play like the travel ball, like, the others. But anyway.
It does happen.
Yep. Yeah. What's new with you, Ty? That's my sports outlook.
I had some work travel. I was to Memphis and then into Toronto for the Jays game on Friday night with some people from the great state of Florida, who we will have on the podcast in future. Works for some cool things in the city of Miami. Has some cool Marlin stories that he'll share with us in a future podcast.
Oh, nice. Is this the dude who joined up in the Dynasty League
that drafts all of your guys, which makes me so happy?
Pissed me off to know. And we even made a trade. Good. I traded him Lars Nootbaar and I think something else, some other prospect, like possibly worthy of note, in exchange for 2023 breakout outfielder Bubba Thompson. And let me tell you how well that has worked out for me. But anyway, that brings us to the topic for tonight. I mean, we got to drink first, but then it brings us to the topic.
Agreed.
A long time ago, someone decided to put stuff in glass bottles. In some of these bottles, they put juice or milk, and that was stupid. Today, only alcohol and a few other products remain in the containers from the gods. It's time for beers and bourbon, because good advice only comes in a bottle.
Mediocre.
Coolers.
You know what I was thinking about during the song? I was like, you know what who's really lazy? Number one superfan Ronnie has made zero efforts to comment on any show recently. So
interesting.
Very much open to accepting of new number one superfan. If there's any takers out there, let us know.
You can hit us up at Dingers Pod on Twitter, or find Ty at Tourney Boss, or myself at Robbie Baseball 1. And that's the spot where you can just say, I would like to put my hat in, and then you have to tell us what kind of hat. We're both wearing KC hats tonight.
No, tell us why you're better than Roto Ronnie. That's it.
Oh, okay.
That's what we obviously need.
Perfect. Yeah, do that. That sounds good to me. So Ty, we'll fire right into hot news, and then we'll hit the main topic tonight because you've already led off because you're so darn excited to talk about Christian Encarnacion Strand promoted. So do you have any updates?
First off, from this day forward, he's going to be E Strand. That I'm just making that happen because, like, trying to say
you're getting rid of the whole first name. You don't want to go with the CES like everybody else.
CES is okay, but E Strand's way better and it's unique, and I like it. So I'm going to.
Yeah, that's true. I heard at the All-Star break, Felix Batista. Some reporter asked, like, "Hey, people are calling you King Felix," and then he's like, "No, don't call me King Felix. That's not me." And I'm like, good. And then the like Twitter thread below was, of course, like full of stupid comments about like, why would some Baltimore reporter say that? Da, da, da. Like, well, he said it because obviously fans were saying it at the game. They were trying to anoint him the new King Felix, which thankfully he didn't want to take that crown. So, but nicknames are good for everybody. They're still going to do that weekend, right? The nickname weekend in baseball. They didn't get rid of that.
So. Yeah, I hope so. I think it's funny. They just a little chance for the guys to have fun before the traditional
really happens.
Yeah. Well, no, you don't want to get the pitchforks out. But anyway, CS, if you haven't been listening for the last several weeks, then, shame on you. But, you missed your window. Values through the roof. You know what I do find funny, Robin? We did talk about this a little bit, is that he was on no one's list anywhere in the top 100, very unrelevant on most people's lists. And then all of a sudden, everyone's like, you can't forget to pick this guy up. Must go get him. Like, top page of, like, all the news sites. Like, must have him on your fantasy team. I'm like...
Well, he was a midseason, like we talked about on the previous pod. I think that a lot of midseason adjustment type lists. And one of the things that we know, former number one fan Roto Ronnie used to just make his blood boil when he would see dynasty rankers who fluctuated their rankings so much multiple times in 1 year. Like in season, they would see several updates where, players are moving like stocks. And then you get that excuse like, oh, it's like a stock. The value goes up and down. Yeah, of course the value goes up and down if all you do is look at the current stat line. But if you look at like player skills and ability and where they are within their organizational depth chart, blah, 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 there's more minutia behind, being a little more conservative with your moves, or you go up or down simply because something has happened within the organization that's really shaken it up. And anyway, for him specifically, Roto Ronnie, he was losing it. And when I started to look at some of the lists like 2 weeks ago or so, as they started to pop up from others, I was like, yep, I'm starting to see, your Ty's boy Strand here is popping up like at the last bit of the top 100. And I think you had mentioned before that he was ranked on some list at like 11th for the Reds prospects.
Yeah.
You'd mentioned a guy or two that were ahead of him, but depending on who makes the list, we always appreciate the guys who create content like ourselves. I had a website for a few years. I just didn't feel like paying hundreds of dollars for it again this year, because once you own and kind of establish your site, the price goes up to keep your name. And when they told me how much it was going to cost, I'm like, I am not making any money on this. That's too expensive of a hobby. So the writing has taken a step back, and here we are podcasting. Speaking of fun, exciting things and money, a whole bunch of first round picks are now millionaires. Congratulations. From the last week's MLB draft, also known as the Rule 4 draft. Paul Skeens signed my favorite first round pick so far, Nolan. I can't even say his last name right. Shunil, I think that's right, who signed with the Angels, as well as I think 6 Braves to date have signed. We can't wait until the deadline's passed and we can actually have a look at who has and has not signed and really break these things down, including some immediate targets for anyone who has upcoming drafts like we will next month, Ty. But it's good to see players signing. We always hate when we hear about the holdouts or the medical issues, and hopefully we can avoid all that crap this year.
Yeah, I agree. Wade Miley to the IL.
Suck it, Wade Miley. Suck it.
Yep. Hauser, Ray, to Aaron are all safe for now. I don't know what this Milwaukee team's going to do. They got all this depth. They need another starter if they're going to make a run, because their offense just isn't good enough for them to make it by with what they got. Obviously, we're going to see Woodruff here at some point, assuming the wheels don't come off again. But yeah, this is an interesting rotation. Miley was doing an admirable job, but he was never anything more than a placeholder. So, you've got options to fill in some depth there. We might see like an Ethan Small or somebody like that make a reappearance in the rotation here. But yeah, it is what it is. I made a comment before we jumped on, Robbie. Travis d'Arnaud is a Brave till the end of 24. They extended him with an $8 million deal there. Good for him. Odor got DFA'd before heading to Toronto, which is like Christmas for Toronto fans. No one likes Rougned Odor in Toronto.
The better part would have been if he was in the stadium and then they found out, and then he had to walk between the dugout and go to the bullpen to get out or something. And then everyone could have just given him the walk of shame, because he is absolutely hated in Toronto.
Well,
from what?
I'll say this though, good on the Padres for knowing this scenario and not making him go through a weekend in Toronto and then saying, "Oh, by the way, you're not on the team anymore." Right?
I think they're trying to save money, Ty. They didn't want to pay for the ticket.
Maybe, but here's where you're wrong. There is they had to fly other people from other parts of the country to fill in the spots, so that doesn't check out. But I think the reality is this is where the human side of baseball actually might have played a part in the timing here. Nola not being able to hit the ball also played a portion in that, and why he was sent to AAA. Luis Campusano was activated in return there. Sanchez did start, naturally has no hits, so that's pretty standard for him. He's hit 160 since he's been a Padre. So, I think Austin Nola is – I think that's why Austin Nola went, because, you send him down and be like, okay, just try to not be crappy, and we'll bring you right back.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, they're trying what is it that's gone on with you that you have completely lost your ability to hit, because you had it as a pro, but you had that great year with Seattle where we acquired you 2020. And since then, we've been waiting. You got hurt, and then it hasn't come back. Anyway, somebody who hasn't got hurt and is
just before you move off on that one really quick, I just want to throw a guy to watch in that organization at the catcher position that's not on anyone's radar yet is Oswaldo Linares. So he'll be moving up the board for a lot of people. He's at A-ball this year. He's only been up for a couple weeks, but he's got a couple home runs and a reasonable OPS. He did have a really good stretch at rookie ball before they bumped him. He's hitting 325 OPS of 1157. So he's still got to go a ways here, but that's kind of where we're at.
I'm very sad to hear you say that. Sorry. What did you say the catcher's name was?
Oswaldo Linares.
Oswaldo. Okay, he's not on my. Sorry, I've got a secret list of players that are rostered in 10% or less of Fantrax leagues. that I'm using and I'm scouting. I scouted them in June. I checked in and updated in July, and then before our True Test League draft, I'm checking in one more time in August. He's not the catcher that I had on my list that I think is a steal of a guy. It's a different guy, different organization. I've said too much. Starting pitcher and AAA All-Star Casey Lawrence of Buffalo Bison / Toronto has opted out of that contract. Obviously, he is hoping to get an MLB deal somewhere. And I don't know what'll happen if he doesn't, if he just comes back. But, that's a thing they can do. It's one of those things you talked about, the good stories in baseball, right? The Blue Jays let him go, see if he can find something out there because they want good things for him, knowing that he'll come back if he doesn't. Bad news for Chris Flexen. It looks like he's going to be a Rocky now. So he went from being a Mariner, possible SP6 with them, as we talked about starting the year. Now it looks like he might be a Rocky, and there he'd be like SP2. The only problem is that you have to be a Rocky pitcher. So we'll see what comes of that for him. A couple call-ups in Oakland that are fun and exciting. Tommy Soderstrom, who we mentioned on the last podcast. Also, Zach. The pronunciation. It's Geloff. I need to phonetically say it. Geloff, and then somebody can correct it later. But he's up now. We'll see what happens. We're going to give those guys some at-bats before we really weigh in on them here. But Ty, one of your former favorite guys, Jonathan Schoop, has been shooped out of town in Detroit.
Well, he's Scope, but he has been.
But Schoop, baby. It's better when it's Schoop. Those were the fantasy names.
Yeah, definitely. He got him. This makes sense. I mean, Detroit's turning the page here, right? Scope did an admirable job as a plug, and then he became unplugged, and see you later. So that's just what Detroit's doing on a rotate here. I like what Detroit's future looks like. They had a couple great guys filling that roster out, a couple guys that came out of nowhere. And listen, do you want to at least see what you have in Maton? Do you want to at least give him a chance to figure it out, or do you want to run Scope out there and take up at bats? For me, it's got to be Maton, because they need to make that decision. Is this guy going to be around, or do we need to find a replacement in the offseason? So I think they know the answer to that one, but definitely an issue here. I'll toss it to you here on the Philly side because this is more your world.
Well, this is just someone who last year during the fall league started to get some hype. Outfield stolen base magnet prospect Johan Rojas with Philly is now up. We've seen this last year. Nick Maton was one of those guys that came up with the Phillies. Guthrie was one of the others who's now out in Atlanta. They came up, they got some time, and they did okay. We're going to see what Rojas can do with his time here in Philly. So far, he, outside of being a good defensive outfielder, which we already knew, he has stolen one bag in his 11 at-bats. It's like I said, it's early with some of these guys. It's hard to say that, but anyway, he's kind of a fun one. Somebody who you don't like and somebody who I don't have anywhere because you like him so much have both started rehab assignments with the Astros. That's Jose Urquidy and outfielder Alvarez. I don't know what the timeline is going to be for Alvarez. I feel like Urquidy is probably going to get 3 starts, which means we could see him right before the trade deadline. Otherwise, I'm not too sure. And then with Alvarez
traditionally doesn't take very long. As a guy that bounces off the IL every now and then. Yeah, he doesn't spend a lot of time on there, and he usually doesn't even go on a rehab. So I don't suspect he'll be on there very long. So anyone that owns him, you're in luck. We're going to see Altuve not long after that as well in Houston. So that's another one that's not on the radar yet. But
Jordan, Ty, was supposed to start a rehab assignment and then was sick, so it was delayed a couple days. But now he's out there. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't think he'll be. I think he'll be Friday. I think realistically, you'll see him either
weekend series. Okay.
Yeah, they got Colorado right now, so I don't think they're going to rush him back to face Colorado. But I think you'll see him Friday.
Yeah, wouldn't be too bad to go up against that AAA rotation that the Rockies are throwing out there.
Yeah, Ryan Tepera signed in St. Louis. For me, this is a big flag for those of you that own pieces of the back end of the St. Louis bullpen. This is a suggestion that they are going to try to unload some of those arms. You don't get rid of Cabrera, bring in Tepera if you're not trying to just shake everything up. I'm actually surprised that they DFA'd Cabrera, but I think they might actually just believe they can make a trade with him on that one. So I think that's it. I think they just put him on there to give him 10 days in a roster spot, right? So I think that's kind of their play. but I fully expect Cabrera to be traded, and I wouldn't be surprised if you see at least one other arm in that bullpen go. Yanni Chirinos is DFA'd in Tampa, which is a really interesting one. Like, he obviously faced some injuries, but there was a time where he was real good, right? Like, just about as steady as an SP4 as you could find. And unfortunately, those injuries disrupted that. So it's just hard to believe Tampa's willing to let go of potential starters right now. Like, that just seems wild to me. So,
well, I was just going to say, do you remember Jeffrey Springs, Ty?
Yeah,
like,
don't even bring it up.
It's been a long season in Tampa Bay. Drew Rasmussen, Ty, another one of you.
Why are you doing this to me? I own all of these guys. It's just you're just crushing.
It's been a long year, and then you see Ronnie Trinos. I'm like, whoa, blast from the past, right? He was last decade's, out of nowhere type, possibly useful dude. But Tampa Bay is still rocking and rolling.
I think Luis Patino's a name we're going to have to watch out for, like, as a guy that
Thundering Oak, you think?
Yeah, we might see him. And I just think it's a weird move, like, with their depth right now, for Trinos to be DFA'd, or they believe they can squeeze him through. Like, that's the other thing that could be completely plausible, is they just think no one's going to grab him right now. Let's go get him healed up and bring him back up. So that could be the other option. That'd
be interesting. Now, my boy Shane Bieber on the IL. For a lot of people, this just kind of like was okay, because you're like, all right, cool, Cody Allen's back, so that's all right, because you just kept your rotation of Williams, Allen, Bibee, which I've got to get his pronunciation right now that I've rostered him in. No, it's Bibee. It's Bibee. I heard it on the broadcast. Bibee.
It's always going to be Bibby, because Bibee is stupid.
It's also by Eber on the IL, which got Allen there. But anyway, we'll have to see what's up with Bieber, and if this is a big thing. Obviously, we've got 2 weeks outside the MLB trade deadline. Cleveland's number one target trade target would be to unload Bieber. So if he's on the IL and you're just trying to make sure it's okay, that's one thing. But again, you're a competitive team. Every start matters. So it would be interesting if that was their little bit of gamesmanship within this.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do, or what they're even targeting, right? I mean, that's the other thing too. Like, what is Cleveland?
Do they really want a first baseman, right? Do they want to? Because Josh Bell's one and done this year. He had a dinger tonight, but I mean, it has not been a good year for him so far.
You know what they're probably thinking in their front office? We really need a below-average outfielder. Let's go find one.
Let's get 3.
Yeah, let's bring them all in here. So speaking of below-average outfields, Pittsburgh has brought in some of the youth movement here. Quinn Priester started last night. He got through 5 2/3, I believe, 7 hits, 2 walks. That's not awful, right? A lot of people today were like, he was bad. Like, no, 5 2/3, 7 hits, 2 walks for a kid. Not the worst.
First start. Come on.
Yeah. I mean, there's better starts out there, but that's certainly not one that you're like, this guy's the worst. He came with Andy Rodriguez, who we've been excited about, Robbie. This is one for me. He got post-hyped already, right? He went up the hype train. He's back down the hype train. I'm going to try to go get him in the offseason, Robbie, because I think he's going to struggle here the rest of the way. So I'm excited about that, because I think there's still a very, very good ball player here, and I'm going to wait for him to fall down the mountain and pick him back up. So the last guy that came up here, Leover Peguera, an interesting prospect. I think they might have moved him a little too quickly, Robbie. That's my opinion. I think he could have done with a little more seasoning. 22-year-old. He's, his AAA numbers this year are okay. 259, 2 home runs in just 27 at bats, but 11 home runs, 260 and a 786 OPS at AA before that. So I don't think this is enough to rush him. I know Hayes is hurt. I mean, you're losing some at bats in that lineup. He does play short and second, so it does let them move some things around. But I don't know. I just don't feel this is necessarily the guy you should have rushed.
Well, he got up last year, but it was for 1 game, which was really odd. And then they've had other guys.
Was it a taxi squad game, or was it a straight?
I don't recall. I only know that he had come up, and then I just very quickly looked and said he was 1 game is all the stat line said. So I don't recall the circumstances. But then they also had I think it's Triolo, something like that, another guy that had come up, and I don't know if he stayed up or if he went back down within these moves, because they've had, 4 of their best prospects come up in the last 2 weeks. So whatever. I'm cool with it. You know, like we're all excited to see Cincinnati do it. So for
Yep.
Pittsburgh doing it, we've got to, you know, same division, we've got to support that. We know it's not going to work out for everybody. We did see it take 5 years for Mitch Keller to finally settle in. Hopefully Quinn Priester doesn't have that rocky of a road, but good to see that he didn't get blown up. I know, like you said, the reports weren't glowing, but I prefer just getting outs than I do dominating a lineup and then getting blown up in the fifth when they've seen you twice and all of a sudden they've solved you. So I'm going to give some credit to him for that. And we already know that it didn't go well for Rosny Contreras. The track record for Pittsburgh developing starting pitchers not named Cole has been very bad the last decade and change. So let's just try to stay positive with that. And maybe the addition of the 2 catchers that they just brought up will help that along. I know the traditional thing is you get the wily veteran catcher to catch your young rookie. Maybe that's, you know, been put aside because Rodriguez has been catching Priester for a couple of years. I don't know. I'm guessing there. Something that no one's going to care about, but I just kind of find funny is that JP Higgins is back with the Cubs. He, I think, was DFA'd and then the Diamondbacks picked him up and he was just depth with them. Well, he's back. Last year, he came up and was doing some good things in August into September when the Cubs were kind of washed, which again, I mean, maybe we're going to get there with the Cubs if they decide to fire off a few of their boys. But remember former top air quotes prospect for that whole offseason last year, Matt Mervis? Man, that if like, I'm not saying he's done, not at all, but like talk about flash in the pan for fantasy content creators out there. Like everyone was talking about him as if he was going to be Pete Alonso, 40 bombs in the bank, like all these things, starting first baseman for opening day, like all the way through. And I was throwing caution flags on it. I'm not saying JP Higgins is blocking Matt Mervis. I'm simply making a comment that it's interesting that the Cubs want Higgins back, who I think is like 30. And Matt Mervis isn't just like an automatic, like you can come up and suck with us versus bringing in more organizational depth, which just, you know, I think it tells me something. I don't know what you guys think out there. Again, you can always hit us up at Dinger's Pod and say we're crazy. But
I think Higgins is also a catcher too, right? So I think the other part of he can
catch first base DH is what he did last year.
Yeah, so I think this has probably a higher likelihood of somebody adding Yan Gomes in a trade, and they're prepping the roster a little bit for that because Gomes is a decent defensive catcher. He's played in a lot of playoff games, so I think he's a guy that could be on the move as a depth move. So that I think might be part of this. Underneath it, the other part of it too is Mervis is, you know, like you said, he might not be completely out of the scene yet. So why rush that guy back if you're working on stuff, right? And I think that's probably the case here because his numbers at AAA aren't bad. I was looking at it today.
Okay,
he's doing okay. So I think they're probably just erring on caution, not wanting to rush him. But I think we'll see Mervis this year, but it'll be post-deadline probably. So
I'm trying to see. I know in his 90 at-bats, he only had 3 dingers, and that's supposed to be the calling card. At AAA, though, Ty, he's only got 9, 150 at-bats, mind you. So I guess there's an injury. It's the batting average. Last year, he had a 309 batting average. This year, it's 295. That's not a dip, by the way. Like, his OBP's gotten better. It's one of those, like, he came up, and all of a sudden, it's like, holy crap, these guys throw better. And we've seen that with a bunch of guys. We're going to talk about a bunch of them shortly. But anyway, I'm not saying
it could be just approach.
Out,
yeah, it could just be approach change too, which means less power, right? Like they could say, listen, we don't want you to hit 40 home runs. We want you to hit 25 and hit 305, right? Like that legitimately could be what they're asking of him. But moving on, in another stellar Colorado Rockies front office move, they signed Antonio Senzatella a couple of years ago doing a pretty reasonable extension for his track record, and he's played exactly like 4 games since. So, you know, just Colorado doing their thing. And, you know, he's headed for Tommy John. That's great. Add him to my list in TDL, Robbie, of just the 40 pitchers that I have. Well, I've got him. I've got Springs. I've got Rasmussen. You know, just my.
I should have looked at your roster and then just started rhyming them off and waited till I see a tear come down below your sunglasses there.
Painful.
So Senzatella 2025 is our best case scenario for him, but the fact that he was only like kind of possibly useful some of the time, that is totally out the window now. We don't know who he's going to come back as. Yeah. So, but somebody that I like, you loved this guy and then dialed it back a bit, and I think I've fallen and never let go of Kyle Freeland. He buggered up his non-throwing shoulder and is now on the IL. I don't know what that means in terms of rehab time, but Colorado, if anything, I feel like they're going to get him back in as soon as they can. simply because they don't have other arms that they're willing to burn. Like everyone they've tried to burn, Noah Davis amongst them, who was like possibly somebody you might want to pick up in your dynasty leagues, they've all gotten hurt. And the ones who haven't, that were still bad, like Kaufman, who came up just like throwing an 11 ERA out there, it's bad. So if Kyle Freeland can throw with his left hand, which he does as a professional, I don't see why they wouldn't just try to Jim Abbott him and get him to just use the left to also field. So we'll see what they do there.
I just think it's incredible that this team's not picked first overall at least once recently.
With the well, the Reds were supposed to.
It really speaks to the
right?
execution on the Pirates front office. Like, I mean, it really does.
Or sorry, I said the Reds were supposed to have picked. They weren't supposed to have picked first last year, but the Reds have. They were supposed to pick fourth, and I think they got pushed back to 7. That's what it was. That they were the ones who, from the lotto, got hit the worst. But the last bit of news, ties, is the most exciting. I mean, I talked about him last year on the podcast. He was on all of my draft target lists, but didn't make it onto any of my dynasty rosters until this season, when he returned from injury and continued to stroke it like he had last year. But instead of stroking it at AA, he was stroking it at AAA. Trey Cabbage, everybody, is up with the Angels. I thought he was a long shot third base type, Rendon blocking him thing. Well, you know what? Jared Walsh has sucked so bad that he's now the first baseman with the Angels. I think he's going to get a long look. 9 at bats so far. He's hitting 444 with an 11-11 OPS tie. This is a future Hall of Famer. We can trade Ohtani. We have hired some cabbage. They're going to cure it. It's going to be sauerkraut. Yeah. It's double horn.
I like it. There's a really stupid loop feature that comes on by default.
Oh, if you don't automatically, well, since you took away my ability to do it.
But why would you default? Why would you default loop? I don't even understand it. Anyway, let's get into meat and potatoes here since we're talking food. And we're going to talk prospects.
Move on from cabbage and get the meat and potatoes. Yes.
That's a top shelf segue for those of you that have been listening. So we're going to go through prospects. We're going to talk better rest of the season, what years to come, and some financial flexibility for those of you in contract leagues. So we're going to talk about some guys, some decisions that you can make now, in the future, down the road. And these are things we see all the time that people make terrible decisions on. And, you know, Robbie, I watch it all the time, and I desperately want to know how these conversations go, because I want to steal these players from people and give some of these guys to other people. So we're going to talk about it. And you have kind of here in the notes, Travis Swaggerty was DFA'd this week by Pittsburgh, former first-round pick in 2018. This was a weird one when they picked him for me, Robbie. I think this was an underslot kind of move, and it just never, ever really worked out for them. But, you know, this is a guy that had all kinds of injuries, and I know you've spent a little more time working on him than I have. I've never touched the Swaggerty. But I really wish he would have panned out, because he would have been absolutely great for this argument. We just never saw it.
He would have been ideal for the swagger part. Swaggerty was 10th overall high school. No, sorry, not a high school drafted guy. I don't think. Was he? No, because he's 24 now, I believe.
No, I think he was out of the SEC somewhere. Like, I want to say he was like Mississippi State or something. I'll look it up while you're talking.
Sure. Yeah. He didn't have, hurt by 2020, not having a season. And then really early into 2021, dislocated his shoulder, missed all that year. I mean, 12 games, but whatever. Since then, he had a solid AAA season last year. Been absolutely horrible this year. Also got called up, got a little bit of time, fell flat on his face. And Pittsburgh emerging just had to make a move. They needed him off the 40-man, and he's out. So that kind of gave me the impetus for tonight's topic, which is, trade your prospects. Like, if you, the plain fact here is, don't look at your prospect like the next superstar, because the odds are so far from high that they are. If you can make a trade that's going to make you better rest of this year on your MLB roster, if it gives you better lineups into the future, and if it can give you financial flexibility after you've made that deal, do it. There are lots of leagues out there, Ty. We're in one aggressive one where people are posting players that have $10, $12 salaries, looking to unload them. They're going to also give you a prospect to take on that money. this is the deal for you. If you've got that guy who the stat line, I mean, I've got my guy. I've got my Pittsburgh Pirate, who I'm not giving up on, who I think if I get fair value, I shouldn't even say fair value, like something decent, I should probably give up on him. Mason Martin, got him in several leagues. I've been waiting a long time, but I don't know that he's going to make it. He's a power bat, not even a 3 true outcome. He's a 2 true outcome. He strikes out or he hits a home run. He's not slapping singles and things. He's one of those guys that could be on this, but there are former prospects that we're going to list that have likely peaked in their value, definitely in the prospect value, because these guys are not prospects anymore for the most part. I think there's maybe 2 on this list.
The only thing before we jump off Swaggerty though, I just want to flag this because it's interesting to me. Like, and he fits the the potential for a post hype guy for me, Robbie. AAA numbers, like basically in a full season, 578 plate appearances. OPS was 737, right? So like that's not
above
terrible.
Average.
Yeah, like it's enough to say, like, listen, if you're just want to try to add a depth piece, and if you're in a deep league, like this is a flyer worth taking, right? You're going to send a nobody for this guy right now, and it could pan out. Like in a different organization, they could unlock it because his college numbers were good: 963 OPS, 319 batting average, right? So definitely worth a look in some formats. It just depends on your league, like how much roster space you have, but I wouldn't shy away from a really deep flyer here.
Okay. All right. So I wrote this down. I want to say it so everybody knows. Former prospects we're about to list have likely passed the peak value, and we hope you, the listener, don't make the same mistake others have by holding on to your guys instead of trading them for MLB assets. So this is not trade your prospect for another person's prospect. You're not getting any further with that. What we're saying is if someone's knocking, here are a bunch of dudes that we're about to rhyme off that have peaked as prospects, have gone up, have done various things since that peak. And we're just going to let you know kind of where they're sitting today so that you don't make the same mistake with your prospect. And then we've got a list of guys down below that we think might be those prospects who you might be better to unload today than to keep for tomorrow. Ty, would you like me to start off? Because this was somebody that I've rostered in several leagues, and I don't know if you have stronger feelings, I think, about the next one.
Yeah.
Does that sound good?
Okay.
Okay. So 4th round pick in 2016, but cusp top 100 guy, 2017, 18, first baseman, third baseman, Boston's Bobby Dahlbeck. His MLB stat line in 826 career at bats, 45 dingers, a 231 average, and a 298 OBP. Nothing to write home about. Never been great on runs and RBIs. In AAA this year, 22 dingers, 57 runs, 50 RBIs, a 306 average, and a 419 OBP. Bobby Dahlbeck is a very good AAA player, and I don't think Boston has a place for him in the future. It's Tristan Casas at first base, we're assuming. Obviously, it's Devers at third. You don't have anywhere for Dahlbeck to go. We don't know what's going to happen with him, but once upon a time, Bobby Dahlbeck was in a trade from my very good championship run team where I traded Bobby Dahlbeck away. I received back David Price, who I think 2 weeks later got hurt and then didn't pitch again for me, but he was a trade piece. I made the deal and traded Bobby Dahlbeck. And when he came up, he had a really brief cup of coffee where he was excellent and everybody swooned over Bobby Dahlbeck. And that was the peak of Bobby Dahlbeck. He right now, like I just said, that AAA line looks great. He could not convert and do that at the MLB level with any lineup right now. He was the one guy on this list, Ty, that I actually traded away, that I rostered somewhere and got a return, but the return fell flat on his face. And I think it was like Boston's David Price, like before the Dodger thing. Like this was a while ago. So anyway, Bobby Dahlbeck, he's an example of a guy you might want to, you may have wished you've done something differently with.
Yeah, and I mean, the next guy here is, Estevan Florial, who has had such a weird one. It's such a good case study for prospects because this was the Jason Dominguez before Jason Dominguez, right? Like this guy was a can't miss superstar, just waiting to happen. Best prospect in baseball. He's so good. And this is the Yankee hype train. We see it all the time. We've talked about it for years. Like, look at Anthony Volpe. Look how good that guy was supposed to be, right? And
Oswald Peraza.
Yep. You name it. Like Yankees, have not done a great job of actually getting those guys ready for the pros. It's been a really long time since we've seen a core come up through the system. That core was really good the last time, however. So asterisk on that comment. But
well, it was also 25 years ago or more, almost 30 years ago.
And Florial's a really interesting one because he passed through waivers earlier this year, which I couldn't believe at the time. And I made that comment to you, like, I couldn't believe that he slipped through waivers going back into the minors. That you can't tell me there's a team in baseball that doesn't need that guy. Somehow they let the Yankees hold on to him, and he has been really good this year. He's got 21 home runs, 58 runs, 53 RBIs, 291 batting average. And the OBP's up from what his career minor league numbers are with 288 or 388. Sorry. So for me, Robbie, like, we're seeing the best of Estevan Florial right now. So it's a buyer beware scenario here because we've seen the promotion already one time, but we've not seen this balanced production before from Florial. We just haven't. We've seen, that athlete, like a toned down version of Ellie De La Cruz in terms of ability, but like the same kind of profile, like a couple games where he rips it, runs all over the place, does cool things, and then he disappears for a couple games, right? So, that's what we've seen from him, but this balance is a little bit different. So this is the one guy on our list, Robbie, that I'm not is ready to close a door on.
Okay.
So like, but there's still a big asterisk on, like, listen, he went to the pros and did nothing already once. So
three different call-ups, Ty. He's 54 career at-bats, his sub 200 average, but again, 54 career at-bats over 3 seasons. And then 2 of those 3 years at AAA, an elite player.
Yeah.
Because he's hitting all categories. I think he had 39 stolen bases last year. But for some reason, like we now can say safely, his peak as a prospect has obviously as a prospect has passed. I know it's still 54 bats career, but this is someone who everyone's moving on from, although he's only 25 years old. A former Rule 5 first overall pick, Victor Reyes, formerly of Detroit, now with the White Sox. He did get at least 1,214 at-bats, but only 16 home runs, 33 stolen bases. The average, shockingly high for somebody who's on this list, 264, but the OBP is probably a good indication of why, 294 OBP. But this year at AAA, Ty, he's just been great. 16 home runs, 52 runs, 64 RBIs, 301 average, and a 357 OBP. Problem is, I think Reyes is 28. I believe that's the correct number for him. He might be 27, but anyway, the other issue is he's just not doing it at the MLB level. He would be your prototypical role player moving forward. Not that Reyes was a top 100 guy, but he had that off-season buzz the year he was picked because he was Rule 5 drafts in December. So everybody had the whole offseason be like, oh, Victor Reyes, he's going to play. We've seen it with Akil Baddoo, but I didn't want to hammer us over the head. Baddoo's still in the Detroit lineup, although it's been rough. Same with Lewin Diaz. Didn't want to put him on the list. It's been rough. I thought we'd go with some different dudes here, but they all kind of fall under that Victor Reyes cloud of you wanted more, you held on waiting for more as the production dipped, you lost any potential value you could have got back for the guy, and you're either stuck with him or you cut him or you let the contract expire. He would have been a prime guy to move when the iron was hot.
Yep. Yeah, I completely agree on that one. Next on the list is a catcher. Buyer beware on catchers. We've talked about this for years. Zach Collins was a 10th overall pick by the White Sox. He's 28 now, and don't get me wrong, Zach Collins is not the worst baseball player on this list, but definitely not a fantasy stud, right? The AAA numbers are reasonable: 14 home runs, 54 runs, 65 RBIs, 275 average, and 380 OBP. Like, those are good numbers, right? Especially for a catcher, lefty bat, but the pro numbers just not as good. He catches a good defensive game. He's probably like a great backup in most scenarios, but he's also just a guy that no one's going to jump out at on waivers. So he's getting all of his options have been used. He's being DFA'd and no one's grabbing him. So he's just past that prime. There's better upside guys that are out there, and that's Collins' problem. And he definitely cannot hit lefties. So that's the other part for him. So, that makes it hard to roster him in a lot of scenarios.
And I know for sure Zach Collins in fantasy leagues was a coveted player because he was a catcher that was bat first. Like, that was the initial book on him. Zach Collins will be a catcher, won't move off the position, won't be a first baseman. This guy can catch, and he can hit. So people were like, I love him. I want him. You know, Reese McGuire was another example of a guy who was a top 100 list guy who just never panned out in the sense of like the high offense. However, he has had blips. Zach Collins, not so much. But this one, Ty.
Just fun stat really quick, Robbie.
Mm-hmm.
His career versus lefty batting average, 161. His career batting average versus righties as a lefty, 192. That's just not going to cut it. Yeah, not going to cut it for a bat first guy.
Yeah, definitely not. And then, like I said, the AAA line for some of these guys, you're wondering why they haven't gotten another shot. Well, you know, like to your point, what are they going to do? Bat him against lefty? Oh, no, they can't bat him against just righty. Oh, no, there's no track record when you get to the best pitchers in the world. But Ty, in order for me to say the next guy, I got to have another, because this one's going to hurt here. This is 2017 first round pick, 17th overall, Keston Hiura with Milwaukee. He's now 26. He's a quote infielder. The MLB stat line, I can't get into it. All right. Because he had a successful short, but a successful run, his rookie campaign. And then the wheels began to fall off. Yeah, I get it, Ty. You didn't like him from the start. I don't care. Okay. This is someone that I died with in the ride or die scenario. I died with Keston Hiura, even reacquiring him in one dynasty league twice, traded him away 3 times.
Did you ever see the movie with Will Smith, Eva Mendes, Kevin James? It's like a dating movie or something. Yeah, that's Hiura's problem.
What is the problem? The hitch in the swing?
In his swing. It's hideous.
Okay. Well, there is a player on the other end of this that's got a very pronounced leg kick we'll talk about. But anyway, Hiura is the prime example to me of the great offers were coming, and I should have realized that he was a second baseman, and at the time I should have moved off and gotten value elsewhere, you know, done the 2-for-1 kind of thing. But I was stubborn, especially when the struggle started, even into this year, when some people made offers to me because they were like, we broke it down in the offseason. There was a path. Like I squinted. I did the right amount of squinting to make a career for Keston Hiura, but it was not to be. And now I cut him in the last league that I had him in to create roster space for whoever, like a non-remarkable player. But it's really unfortunate what's going on. Even though at AAA, you know, we're seeing a 311 average, almost a 400 OBP, 14 dingers. It doesn't matter because when he comes up, he is overmatched. And like that's dynasty value lost and forgotten.
Yeah, I agree. A guy that definitely had some people excited for a while, Scott Kingery in Philly, is just gone. He's just gone. He's a broken man. He's a future major league manager of the year. But his pro playing career is definitely over. You know, was built up. He signed this contract. Good for him. Like him and his agent absolutely cashed in at the right time. So kudos to them. Either that or this guy just, you know, bought a house with a pool and just chills out all day and, you know, was like, listen, I'm good here. Either way, he probably is okay on this. But the AAA numbers are barely good enough at this point. 271, 340 OBP, 11 home runs, 18 stolen bases. I mean, I guess there's some profiles to that, but we know the hit tool doesn't play at the pro level. And, you know, this was a second-round pick in 2015 and had the extension before he ever played an MLB game. Now, he looked like he was going to be a star. Like, he really did. There was a lot of track record. He was crushing it. People were excited about bringing him up. And then he had a good, you know, rookie season for the most part. And then it just went off the rails after that. So definitely a disappointing scenario there with him. And a very similar scenario with Jeter Downs in Boston, who was a shortstop prospect, came over from the Dodgers in the David Price trade. It was definitely just a dump from the Dodgers, and I got to imagine Boston's looking back going, whoa, I really wish they would have sent Downs to LA instead. Because
but even like if you look and you're like, well, who could they have had in that system? It would have been like a Gavin Lux, would have been another guy in Bush, and around. Well, I don't know if they had Bush at that time, but definitely Lux, I think, would have been kicking around because those guys were both like the cuspy top 100 kind of prospects, and Downs was the guy because he was the contact speed guy. And oh man, like it just became obvious he chose power over contact and wiped out. Like you talked about it last year when they brought him up, Ty, that it was like this might be the be serious, get your shit together. This is the time for you.
The crazy part is they were supposed to get Gratterall in that trade. And
that's
then
right.
Somehow that fell
wasn't
apart.
That Miami?
No, Gratterall was supposed to go to them, but because of something going to LA, I forget what was going to LA.
Yeah. That one didn't go, and then it was Gratterall to the Twins?
No, I forget it.
No, Gratterall came from the Twins, right?
Yeah, you talk about the next guy here. I'm going to look up this trade.
Okay, sure, because that's interesting. Well, this is the final guy of the, don't hold on to your guys too long. This is a great example. Again, very much like Scott Kingery, got the MLB extension before he played an MLB game. Evan White, former first-round pick of the Seattle Mariners. Dipoto very rarely makes an error, but this is one. He was in the 2017 draft. Where was he overall in the draft? 17th overall. And he's been a horrible MLBer and hurt, like devastating injury. This year at AAA, he's only played in 2 games. And I don't know if that was earlier in the year or this week that he came back, because I don't watch anymore on the Evan White train, because even last year when he came back, 204 average, 308 OBP, which doesn't sound terrible, but this was in 107 plate appearances. In 2021, with the big league club coming back, he had 104 at bats, 144 average. I don't know what the deal is. He's amazing defensively, or was pre-injury, but no. This is like the classic guy who can go to the KBO and try to come back if he can learn to hit. Like this is, maybe not an Eric Thames situation where he's going to all of a sudden be, Godzilla, but this is a situation where he's not in anyone's view as a future MLBer, even though I forgot to just check to see if he was 26. Well, is that right? 27.
He's definitely not going to the KBO until that contract's over. That's
no, certainly not until the contract's over. Yeah. But if everybody passes on him and Seattle lets him walk, he can go just to get some, maybe he's a Mexican league guy. I don't know. I'm just saying he needs to, rediscover it. And as dynasty owners, he's a great example of somebody who you knew he came up and you're like, oh, he's really good defensively. He's the type of guy like a CJ Abrams where you're like, I'm going to wait it out and he's going to develop. The difference is that Abrams has like little pops here and there where you're like, I get it. But then you see with Washington, they're like, oh, he's our leadoff guy. Like we truly believe in CJ Abrams, and it makes sense to hold on to Abrams and not get rid of him. Even though the stat line doesn't look great, you're going to believe in that, possible 700 plate appearances. Whereas with Evan White, it's like, a year ago, it was clear Ty France had taken over on the depth chart permanently, and Evan White was an afterthought. And it just became more clear every day since then. And you've got no value. You can't include him in a trade whatsoever for value. Like that ship has long sailed. So there's some of these cusp guys that we're going to talk about right now, and then we're going to dip into more prospects with a few guys who have been up and down this year. But Ty, you want to lead it off here with your Tampa Bay Ray?
Well, I'm going to go back to the trade first.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah.
Recap so it was Maeda was supposed to go to the Twins, Gratterall and Verdugo were going to the Red Sox, and Betts and Price were going to the Dodgers. So Gratterall, they were worried about the health, so it ended up being Maeda went to Minnesota with Yara Camargo and Cash for Gratterall, Luke Raley, and the 67th pick, which became Clayton Bieber, Bieber. Okay. And then the trade was eventually completed for Betts and Price, and got Verdugo, Downs, and Connor Wong, your boy. So
yeah, that worked out great for Boston because Mookie Betts hasn't done anything. Oh, never mind.
The interesting thing for me though is like if I was in Boston's shoes and I saw Andy Pages go into LA, because that was the other thing that was
for Hunter Renfroe.
No, I forget what it was. I forget who they were sending. They were sending Rengifo. The Angels were sending Rengifo and somebody else, and I forget who it was. But Andy Pages was going back there, and it's like, if I'm Boston, I don't know how you take Wong and Downs without navigating what Pages in a trade looks like. So that was a huge, huge whiff on their part. Because I mean, if they would have Verdugo's and Pages coming here, like that franchise is in a different spot about the next couple of years here. So very interesting. But yeah, let's get into the rest of the list here. We've got Vidal Brujan's an interesting one for me as a guy that has came up, had the speed profile. Like it's a really interesting one to consider when you look at the success of like Esteury Ruiz.
Right.
If you look at that career arc, like Vidal Brujan is a very similar type of player. So it could be one where we see a 270 average and 30 to 40 stolen bases here. But we're
so Ty, sorry. Are you saying that you're not sure on Brujan, or are you saying like if someone's offering you, now's the time to make it, regardless of what he could do? Because Ruiz never did it at the MLB level. Brujan's been up and down a few times now.
Yeah, no matter what happens at all, you're definitely trading Brujan for any reasonable offer. Like no matter what.
I got you.
Like that's a non-starter. Like you do not ignore trade offers for him at all. That said, if you got to hold on to him, there's still a chance he could come around with a little bit of speed here, on the back half here. So like I'm not ready to shut him down. I'm just not there yet. Because I think if there's a franchise that can figure it out, I like Tampa to be able to give him that run. The next guy here in Atlanta is a guy I'll let you go with because you have the book on him. So I'll hand that over.
Yeah, I mean, we did go into it really early this season with Vaughn Grissom. But, I mean, it's clear Atlanta's not interested in a bat first, second baseman / I don't know where they can play him. So they, not officially but unofficially, have moved on. Orlando Arcia's getting the pop over him. So outside of a trade, which I still think just gives you a second baseman with a pretty good hit tool, the ability to get you, your base 5 categories, I don't know that you want anything to do with Vaughn Grissom. Like after this year, if Atlanta leaves him down, if they don't find a trade partner, if they're looking, I'm assuming they'd be looking, if they don't find a trade partner for him to get them some type of return, Vaughn Grissom might just be like in fantasy purgatory. He's not helping your dynasty team whatsoever. Even when he does come up and or get moved, there's no assumption that he's all of a sudden going to become like a 70 run, 80 RBI type guy. He's not a heavy bat. He's not looking to lead a lineup. I don't know the best case scenario for Vaughn Grissom now. A year ago, it was really exciting. 2 years ago, he was a super prospect. Now, you wouldn't have made the trade 2 years ago. Last year, you would have been foolish to make it. But now you're shows you how quickly the fortunes can change. Now we've seen what Atlanta's actually thinking from the baseball standpoint, not from the offensive standpoint. And they don't like it. They don't know that he can play second base. So I don't know what in the heck you want to do, but certainly if somebody's out there trying to nip away, thinking they'll take a shot on him, you've got to look and see what you can get back. That's going, like, I would absolutely take a legitimate, middle infielder player who's up with a big club right now and might be capped at 15 home runs, 50 to 60 RBIs, 50 to 60 runs, but a 250 plus average over the shot at Vaughn Grissom recapturing what he did last year. I don't know that that's going to happen again. I certainly want him to be good. Like, of course we all do, right? We don't want anyone to fail when we're looking at fantasy stats, but the hard truth of it might be that he's not good enough to play second base in MLB if Atlanta was no longer willing to punt the position. So
I could see
he's a sad case.
I'm going to throw a hypothetical trade out here. Vaughn Grissom to St. Louis for Paul DeJong and maybe a reliever.
Interesting.
I just think that could be an interesting, just an exchange, a change of scenery. Paul DeJong would be a good depth veteran for them. Be an interesting move. Stick on the middle infielders. Michael Busch is a guy on this list that really hasn't passed the peak yet. We don't know what the peak is. We thought he'd be up by now. We're waiting for him to take that jump. Maybe that peak just continues to get too far away and he never ever realizes it. But he's produced continuously in the minors. He's had a real small cup of coffee. We should see him in the list we're going to talk about in a little bit. But the question I'm asking here, Robbie, is like, why isn't he at the peak as a prospect? Why hasn't he got there? What's wrong with him? It's not a lack of opportunity in the Dodgers lineup. Like, for heavens, they've been running Jason Hayward out there. So,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
And
Like,
that's
it's
really
not-
confusing. Like,
Yeah.
Bush is an infielder, but like everybody else, you can move him to left field, right? You can move everybody to left field if you don't have it, I guess, except Vaughn Grissom. You can move everybody but Vaughn Grissom to left field. And I mean, the AAA numbers for Bush last year had everybody excited. The average was the only thing you'd have a small complaint with, but when the OPS was 881 between AA and AAA, the 274 batting average, you're like, that's okay. Well, he's 301 this year at AAA, but he had 32 home runs last year. It's down a bit to this point this year. He's only had 12. However, he has spent time with the big league club. He's got 332 at bats as I'm looking at this tonight, 12 dingers on the year, all at AAA. The MLB debut, not what you want. You know, James Outman came up last year, had a real brief tea sandwich, and then got sent back down. He was great in that, though, and that was like an extra promising thing. Was he came up like I think over a weekend series, got 6 or 7 at bats, something like that. Went back down. Bush got a look, a legitimate look, and then they were like, you know what, Mookie, you can play second base and shortstop and center field. We're just going to move you around. And that's kind of what's happened, right? Like Mookie Betts has been moving around because of Michael Bush hasn't taken off yet. But have the Dodgers moved on? I mean, maybe. I would certainly be listening to a trade knowing Gavin Lux is back next year.
And we're going to see Miguel Vargas again at some point. He's another guy that fits this kind of category as well as like a why haven't they let him? He had that weird injury in spring. They didn't let him hit and all that fun stuff. Yesterday, I looked up their stats from Sunday just as like heading into this episode. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you caught this or not, but he went 1 for 1 with Miguel Vargas did with 4 walks.
Attaboy.
So yeah.
So they're going back to spring training instead of what I thought
pretty
was
much
let him have a 220 average, but let him go and hit 10 dingers and be like, look, you've got the power, believe in yourself. Now come back up and, hit the fastballs.
Exactly. And before we move on to the next one, I just want to make a quick note because you said tea sandwich. So I'm going to go here. Mickey Moniak, another home run, 11 home runs, and his OPS is about to surpass that of Shohei Ohtani. As a heads up. Yeah, just wanted to make that clear.
Another reason the Angels should trade Ohtani. Ty, this is off topic, but I think our next episode is probably going to be, MLB as well as fantasy trade related. A rumor that I recently heard float out, and this is just like people talking out their butts, is can you think of a team that has more to offer the Angels than Baltimore and prospect capital? And I got to say, I couldn't. I can think of teams that have 2 guys. Well, I can think of teams that have 2 guys that would make it make sense to some degree if you're going to lose Ohtani this year and not make the playoffs, or you can try to reset. I feel like the potential for a Baltimore Angels trade would be amazing. Baltimore's not good enough at this point. Grayson Rodriguez is now back up. Thank goodness he's no longer going to be prospect list eligible. But I got to say, it was disappointing to see in a lot of the lists. He had already been removed because they used the BS thing that no fantasy website uses, which is 45 days on the MLB roster. Fantasy sites don't use that. Fantrax will give a guy who's been up all year and sits on the bench. Like, what was it? Gore? The stolen base guy with KC. Gore, I think, is still MLB rookie eligible, according to Fantasy Breakdown, right? He doesn't have the at-bats. He's a pinch runner. But anyway, you get my point. I think Baltimore could put together an amazing package of mostly about to become failed prospects, in addition to some guys that could actually turn out to be really good if they were to make that kind of trade. I can't imagine LA would do that. But if you were to think
would. I don't think Baltimore would.
Well, if you were to think, if you're Baltimore and you're like, do we want to make the playoffs? And not only that, do we want to sell 1 billion jerseys right now, rest of season? It would be very much like when Toronto traded for David Price and made the playoffs, and Price was the ace down the stretch. You trade for Ohtani, you sell the jerseys, you get the hype, everybody's excited, and then he leaves and he goes in division if he ends up with the Yankees next year. Which again, let's not go down that road tonight. But I just thought that was interesting when I read it because I'm like, there's like every position you can imagine, or not imagine, every position in baseball. Baltimore's got at least 2 prospects outside of pitchers that you would be interested in because you're not trading Grayson Rodriguez. You're not. I think you'd probably end up trading DL Hall to the Angels in that deal plus. But it's like, is it Mayo? Is it Connor Norby? Is it Westberg? Like you could name legitimate players that can go back that would justify it. But to your point, Ty, does Baltimore want to take all of that hard work they've been doing collecting those guys, and do they want to give it up for the opportunity to play 4 postseason games?
You don't do it unless you're confident that you're going to have the money to make a run at them, which I mean, they have room to do it.
They could have a minimum salary roster next year of like under $25 million, and then have $75 million for Ohtani.
they have room to do it, but I just don't know that they will. Like it's an interesting. Like I agree, it's one of the teams. If I was to say like there's a dark horse in that trade,
like best fit teams, right? As far as the prospect return for LA, not the team making the trade.
Agreed.
Right? Baltimore doesn't want to sell the farm for the potential, to have him for some big games, exciting games in September, but then lose him, especially if it's very much like the David Price scenario where he just goes in division and then beats you up. If he's already going to beat you up next year, do you want to have him on your side for a bit? I don't know. But anyway, sorry, off topic. Last guy that you've got for no longer a prospect. The ship has sailed, maybe? I don't know.
No, not yet. No, Luis Campusano, the ship hasn't sailed yet, but definitely a guy that fits this group that we've been talking about here. Like that peak still keeps moving away. Like we've never seen the peak of Campusano. We've seen the upside. We've seen the AAA numbers consistently, right? But we've never seen it translate into the pros. But I don't believe, this one, and I'm going to put him and Michael Busch in the same kind of category. I don't believe it's from a lack of ability. It's either an approach thing or mental focus or opportunity not really there. Like for me, like I go and play men's league and I watch some of the guys I play with and they step off the bench. They haven't played baseball in 3 weeks and they're just like, oh, I'm going to hit baseballs. I'm not that guy. I need BP. I need to get in there and see reps. And this one thing we talked about Florial earlier, like even all those 54 at bats or whatever you said he had 54 games, none of them were consistently in a row, right? These things matter to certain players. And these are the things that most people don't look at when we're having these conversations about prospects. What is their opportunity? Did they get a consistent run? And you're going to see different patterns when you think like that. And so Campusano fits that for me because at the pro level, he has not had that, like, listen, you're the guy. Go out there and do it, right? And Moniak would fit that category. We just talked about him, like, as a guy that had a couple of sprinkles with Philly, and they're like, he's not quite figuring it out. And then, listen, all of a sudden they gave him a chance. He started doing some things, and now look at him. He's a ball player. Right. So these are the things you got to watch for in these post hypes. And I think Campusano could be that guy because the power's there. He's a good enough catcher to play. He's better than all the other catchers that they have that are MLB ready. So I like him to be a shocker down the stretch here. Just throw in a couple good weeks here or there. And I do like him heading into next season as long as he gets the run of at-bats the rest of the season.
Okay. So that was an ad for Luis Campusano rosterers out there. Hold your boy. I mean, this is the be careful episode, but Ty's got a guy that he wants you to not move. And that's fair. Or maybe this is the only buy target that we're going to talk about tonight. Because the rest of them are absolutely, the rest of them are absolutely be careful. So first up on the, who do we think aligns with the players we just talked about as far as the trajectory being right now, prospect peak, like who are guys you should seriously consider trading? I'm going to lead us off, Ty, with one that's less controversial this year, but I mean, 3 years ago when he was a 20-year-old, this was going to be the future of pitching, and that's Kumar Rocker with Texas. He's 23 years old. He's at high A. He's right around the average age for high A. It's only 6 starts, good stat line, and if it wasn't for the fall league last year, Kumar Rocker would be already fantasy, fodder. No one would care. But I fear he's going to end up in that RP closer type. And after hearing, about Garrett Crochet not going to be a starter, there's going to be issues. And I just kind of said, you guys are all wrong. Ty, can it? I don't want to hear it. This guy's legit. And I have since lived that Garrett Crochet roller coaster lifestyle. I'm living it right now on this final IL rehab stint before he emerges as the next ace of the White Sox. I am joking, everyone. I'm very concerned with my Garrett Crochet shares. I shed one early this season, but because of that, I have learned I am smarter now. Kumar Rocker, I think you got to listen to reasonable offers on him, especially if it involves, like we said off the top, an MLB pitcher, an MLB position player that's going to help you Now, if he's going to help you the rest of this year, if he's going to help you next year, if he's going to save you some money by making this deal, you include Rocker with some, like if you've got Syndergaard, I've got him in a league at a high salary. If I had Rocker and Syndergaard, I would happily make that trade in order to shed the Syndergaard salary and look for anything back that could be like a throwaway to kind of J2 guy that might have a hit tool that the person trading him away doesn't overly believe in. Very, very heavy caution on holding Kumar Rocker right now.
I think if you're a couple years away, like if you're in a rebuild, I think you hold Kumar. That's my only thoughts. Like I don't see him as an RP closer type. As long as Tommy John is successful, I think there's a major league pitcher here. The off-speed stuff's just too good. The fastball is too good. I don't see him as a similar pitcher to Garrett Crochet. Like I understand the worries. The injury risk is definitely real. Like I'm not saying it's not completely plausible what you're suggesting, Robbie, but I think there's major league stuff here. And Texas believes it and I believe it. And that's why I have him in several leagues. But I think this is a guy you definitely need to proceed with caution, and you need to watch those early starts after Tommy John, and you need to try to sell him if those starts aren't there. But I don't see why you would trade him right now, Robbie. I just don't think the value is going to be there. I think there'd be more value once he starts climbing up the lower minors again, because he's going to start in A-ball probably when he comes back, if not rookie. So I just think we're going to have some time to sell him later. I just don't think you get enough. If you get way more than you should, then yeah, you probably take the trade.
Yeah, I just think that this is a scenario where you're going to end up with like a 25, 26-year-old guy who's, hitting AA, or not hitting, but whatever, pitching AA into AAA for a season. He's going to get rocked around. And I think he's just heavy caution. Next guy up here, Ty, outside of the mustache, he's just not a fit for me. Hell of a mustache. We know he looked great on draft night. We talked about it a couple years ago. Austin Wells, catcher with the Yankees, promoted this year to AA. And where has he been at AA? Most of the year has been at AA. And he's been okay, serviceable, 247 average, 335 OBP. Again, we expect these things out of catchers. 2-1 strikeout to walk ratio. The power's good, not great. Last year he had 20 dingers. I don't know if that included the fall league or not, but doesn't matter. 12 so far this year. I think as we're going to see him go up in competition, we're going to just watch that classic catcher thing where the stats, the production all goes down. I think he's also stolen base guy. Let me just very quickly look here. Stolen bases for Austin Wells. Yeah, he had 16 last year. Another little nugget that you like. But I don't see the Yankees letting their future starting catcher run around the bases. He's 6 foot 220. You're not letting that go charging around the bases, no matter how big MLB makes him. I'm throwing a huge caution here on Austin Wells. I would make a deal to get him off your roster now. This is my warning to you, the listener. Ty, are you with me on this, or am I sailing my own boat here?
I'm on the opposite side of this. This is my favorite type of prospect to acquire, a guy that had a low-end hit tool that's progressing. Obviously, coming out of college, everyone's like, oh, he hit 300. Like, cool. Every major league prospect hit 300 in college ball. So they're like, oh, now he's hitting 200. Now he's hitting 260. But like the things that I like to see here, Robbie, at high A, there was a 323 blip, 1,000 OPS. But what I really like, if you look across the 819 OPS is his low point at AA. So what I like here, Robbie, is this is really where you move as a catcher from I'm just playing ball to I'm a serious catcher and I need to play defense first, right? So for the numbers to stay where they are and be catching some of the elite pitchers in the organization, that suggests to me that he can do both. So like, I like this. I would expect to see a strong finish for this season. And if he doesn't go to AAA before the end of the year, I think you'll see a strong AAA start next year. And there's no one stopping him from playing in New York. I think we'll see him in New York middle of next season.
Okay, I'm on the complete opposite thing on that with Wells. Taj Bradley's the next guy up, 22-year-old pitcher with the Rays. What are your Taj Bradley impressions before I dump all over him?
I've recently traded him. Rest of season, I don't like him. I like him rest of career though. I think he's a must own in all scenarios. I do not like him rest of season though. I think he's just been rushed, but the stuff plays. It's just a matter of location and finesse and just a little bit of very similar to what Manoa's dealing with, right? Like just a little bit of tightening up the polish and mechanics. And Tampa knew it, right? The only reason he's in the pros right now is because of all the injuries they had, right? So that's, I think if you're taking an objective view here on Taj Bradley, like, and you've watched him pitch and you see the stuff plays. He's 22. He's going to be fine. But not this season. Like if you need to make a playoff run and you're counting on him, it's not going to work. So you need to consider your alternatives if that's what you got.
Yeah, like a 5.43 ERA is not helping in your basic 5x5. 80 Ks and 61 1/3 is, but a 1.38 WHIP, again, not helping you. So some of your base categories, he's very confusing. I don't have quality starts here. Maybe I can find it. Does he have a decent number of quality starts? I don't have any. Anyway, he's been good as a minor leaguer. Sorry, I guess he's been elite as a minor leaguer. But the inning counts are the other issue here. We're going to see at most, like, what did he pitch so far this year? 79 innings. His career high is 133. That was last year. So we're going to have roughly at most the same this year, not likely, which means next year he's going to run into that same type of cap situation. Again, it's a 23-year-old, which means he's not going to get his official pitch the most innings you can possibly pitch until 2024. And at that point, a bunch of these Tampa Bay guys could come back. I just don't know that it's worth it to take a shot at Taj Bradley, really honing it in a very tough division when the return for veterans is going to be greater who are already at the same level, right? This isn't somebody who's at A-ball that we're saying sell. This is an MLBer, but these are the type of guys who, when they struggle or when they're not hitting the categories that you need for your league, right? Guys got 5 wins this year, 5 losses. If he's not getting it done for you, he's on your bench. And then next year he's taking up a bench spot or you're streaming him. And maybe you could just have an everyday starter in place who's 7 years older.
Not to throw a stick in the spokes, but he did pitch tonight for 5 innings, struck out 9, 5 hits, 2 earned against a very good Texas team. So he did take the loss, but certainly not necessarily his fault. He was up against Eovaldi, who threw 6 innings, 2 hit ball, and no runs earned, right? So but 9 strikeouts though, right? This is why you should believe in Bradley long haul. But like I said, this is going to be a spotty, like 1 good start, 3 bad starts, 1 good start, 2 bad starts. Like that's what you're going to see rest of the year. But you know, I cannot say he's going to be bad for the foreseeable future because it's not going to be true. He's very good.
Well, the concern is for fantasy stats, and that's where I'm sticking it here. Like as far as a pitcher developing whatever as a 22-year-old, 6'2", 190, he's got the right build, blah, blah, blah. Fantasy stats, if he's not getting it done, he's already not doing – if you're in your basic 5x5, there are no save holds, which I get it. He's a starter. That category's out, which makes it even more important that he doesn't suck in your other 4. So if you've got your wins, you've got your quality starts, you've got strikeouts, and you've got ERA – he's really only helping you in 1 right now, and that's your strikeouts. So you need him to settle in. You need the lower ERA, like Ty mentioned. Tonight was a good start. That's great. However, I'm just saying right now, I would risk the Taj Bradley loss over the next 5 years and gain myself a upper 20s age legit MLB starter and or whatever your position of need on your team, and I would move Taj Bradley just because I feel like there could certainly be some issues. There's Brady Singer, Ty, who every so often just throws out a really good start and makes you rethink everything. Well, at least makes me rethink everything I thought before. I'm not saying Taj Bradley is the same. I'm saying that there are pitchers who do this to you. Taj Bradley's not someone I'm willing to put into that pool for myself. I don't want him to be streaming when I could be selling him right now for a really good player. Next guy up here, we've got 2 Arizona Diamondbacks. The reasons I'm going to give for Brandon Poff sell are going to mimic Ray Nelson, but I'm just going to very quickly go off on Poff. He's 24. He's down right now in that AAA. He's really fooling us into thinking he's getting it right. But even when he does come back up, the AL West and the 3 strong teams that are in there, plus the fact he's going to have to go to Coors a time or 2 every year, it's going to be tough for him to get wins. Again, I'm harping on the categories because this is fantasy relevant. Quality starts is going to be another thing. Veteran-laden lineups. San Francisco, even if they're not getting 110 wins, They've got good hitters. They got those Lamont Wade Juniors who can get on base. You've got the Dodgers you got to deal with. You've got San Diego you've got to deal with. And again, like I said, you got to go to Coors. It's just going to be hard to get a really solid stat line from them. But right now, I think you could probably get a pretty solid return for MLB players and Rain Nesselin. Same thing with the age. The difference here, Ty, he doesn't have the K per nine. He's got issues with walks, and his whip over 1.4. I'm passing on that. As I've said before, 1.25 is kind of where I draw the line on whip. It's been a hard line for me. If you're going to be over that, you've got to make up for it somewhere else, depending on your categories, especially points leagues. You can't have guys who can't get themselves out of innings, can't get themselves out of jams. So if they're going to have a higher whip, they got to have a really good K to 9. They've got to be able to save you somewhere. I don't see either of these Diamondback pitchers being useful long-term fantasy options versus a trade right now that gives you a potential long-term fantasy player, pitcher, suit your team, make your team better with an MLBer versus holding on to one of these types of guys.
Yeah, like I'm trading both of these guys if I can. Like I'm with you on that one. Like,
oh my God, we agreed. Oh my God, we agreed.
Joey Ortiz fits the same category. I mean, there's a spot in the major leagues for Joey Ortiz. It's not in Baltimore, right? There's just way too much good talent there. He's not that defense first really here. Like a little bit of hit tool, but mostly defense first here. So I mean, he's going to end up somewhere else. Like, I mean, Washington, hello, how are you? Is an interesting spot for him. But I mean, if anyone is giving you anything of at least substance for Joey Ortiz, I'm moving it in a heartbeat.
Yeah, he was a year ago. He was only coming onto the radar as look at the first half this guy's had. I mean, I'm sure we mentioned him, but it was one of those look at the first half this guy's had, right? As a 24-year-old in Double-A, he was I think he was the Baltimore Orioles minor league player of the year, which was almost like a tip of the cap because of all these prospects they've got. It was like, look at this guy, right? And any one of you could be him next year. But then he's come up this year, and like we said, there is no spot there. When they set up that depth chart, Ortiz's name is to the side, right? He's filling in where needed, but I can't imagine he's really had a spot carved out for him. Very much like the next guy, who I'm sure, Ty, you're going to disagree with me on, Addison Barger with Toronto AAA. Right now, he's 23 years old. He a year ago as well started to come up those lists, and people were like, you got to look at this guy. But actually, I just encourage you all, watch how he swings at a baseball. And if you want to talk about an easy way to throw somebody off, you have a quick pitch. He's not going to be able to hit it. You've got the Joe Kellys, Marcus Stromans of the world. They're going to be able to get Addison Barger out, and then the book's going to be out on him. He's got a leg kick that needs some serious coaching. And Ty, you've mentioned on a previous podcast, the Jays need to fire their hitting coach. This is not a good scenario at the moment. Also, where is he going to play? Like second base is the obvious spot you'd think of, but if they're going to put Witt there, I don't know who have they been playing at second base lately. I don't watch the Blue Jays. I'm a Mariners fan.
Witt's been second base for a good chunk of it, and then they've squeezed Biggio and Espinal
the odd time,
sparingly.
Right? Yeah. So Barger's going to have to carve out that role if Merrifield hangs around.
I think we'll see Barger next year. I really do. Like, you're going to have Belt off the lineup probably next year. He'll probably find a 3-year deal somewhere. So I think, you'll see him go somewhere else. I think Barger's going to be on the roster because of the left-handed bat. He just kind of came back off of the IL in the minor leagues, so we haven't seen a lot of him recently. So it'll be interesting to see. He went 2 for 6 tonight in an absolute whooping in a 13-2 victory. But this is, I'm with you. There's definitely some concern, but what I will say is that he does have plate coverage. So if he can get his timing down, which we've seen certain guys be able to do it, it is very hard to do. But I think it's plausible. But I do think they'll quiet it, and we'll figure it out. Now, Joey Wiemer is a guy in Milwaukee, age 24, crazy power, big, huge human. But just, fits the Joey Gallo mold a little bit, Robbie. I'm not in on this whatsoever. I generally don't draft huge outfielders. I don't like the combination of defensive liability generally and injuries, right? Like Aaron Judge is an anomaly. And I said this when they signed that big contract, Robbie. Like Aaron Judge's career could be a complete downhill from here in terms of body breaking down. He's a huge guy. and they've put a lot of miles on him. Just his running around the bases, like a lot of miles on his home runs, right?
Trotting on all those dingers. He needs to walk more, right? Take more walks.
Wiemer has all of that in his future, but like he's not even breaking through on the upside. So I just don't see that changing. I don't see the hit tool that a guy like Aaron Judge has. I don't see the hit tool of a guy that, is a major leaguer here, to be 100% honest. Like this is just a depth outfielder, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah, 2021 was the peak for Joey Wiemer because he was drafted in 2020 4th round. That was that short draft, right? We reference it a lot. Then he came out and went A and then high A. So we had a full season, 396 at bats, 295 average, 403 OBP, stole 30 bags, 27 dingers. I mean, how do you not love that, right? Like that, absolutely what you want out of a fantasy guy. Next year comes out, steals 31 more bags, 21 dingers, AA, AAA. Holy crap, this guy is gonna be somebody. But we're forgetting the underlying thing going on here, which is that K rate's climbing, the walk rate's dropping, and then this year he's just been with the big league club, so he's no longer rookie eligible. He's not a prospect, but this is the rookie season, right? He is a rookie by definition of played one MLB season right now. I don't know that, like you said, Todd, the Joey Gallo thing hangs heavy. I don't know that you want to hang out and think that you're going to get something great out of this. I don't know that he's going to finish this year with 20 home runs, 20 stolen bases. But honestly, I think if he does, that's probably going to be the career peak, a 2020 season. And then we're going to start to see the platoons come in. Again, Milwaukee here, right? They're going to play it. Garrett Mitchell comes in. They've got 19 different outfield prospects that they can run out there the next 3 years. It's going to be tough sledding for Joey. And as much as I like the idea of a 6'4", 220 heavy hitter, I don't like it when he just doesn't have the OBP for me to do it. He hasn't shown me the eye that I need.
His OPS is sub 700 right now, 677. Like that's just not acceptable, right? Like you can't be a power bat and have a sub 7 OPS. Like it's just not major league level. Like
it's OBP simple. Under 300, right? And if you're an OBP league guy, if you're a points league guy, that's where he's going to kill you. You're going to get the home run where in a points league, it's going to be 5, 6, 7 points. We've talked about that before, depending on how your league sets it up for 3, 5 points for a home run, 1 point for a run, 1 point for an RBI. It's going to appear better than it actually is. But again, we're talking right now, this is peak. So this is the sell point right now before you start to see the Keston Hiura type recoil and all that kind of stuff. Like, I don't know what he's going to do to change because all he's done since 2021 is a little bit less, and a little bit of those warning signs, the strikeout rate increasing, the walk rate decreasing. We've seen it now.
And I've got it in front of me. I've got it in front of me too. Like Schwarber has a 189 batting average and his OPS is almost 100 points higher than Wiemer's. So like that's really a great comparable to say like where the value changes, right? Like Schwarber, cool. Like he has his weakness, but he also still helps the team, right? That's that OPS, that's the Moneyball mentality. So interesting. Let's move to an outfielder that is going to be valuable, is a guy that you should be trying to go acquire, and that's Oscar Colas in Chicago. He's going to be part of whatever the burn down looks like here in the next couple of weeks. He's going to be a staple of that roster. Like there's 2 things that you can count on in Chicago moving forward, and that's Oscar Colas and Luis Robert Jr. That's it. Beyond that, like everything else theoretically could change in that organization. So Colas for me is a stud. I like it that he's crushed minor league pitching this year at all, like every minute. He's not quite broken through at the pro level, but he will. It will be fine. He's one of those guys that's not having huge success, but is hitting balls to the warning track. So that will change. Like this is a guy that I would say go buy if you can.
Well, I do not share that opinion. I have him in 2 leagues, one that is dear to my heart and another league where I just have him. And the initial start to the year, I was very excited about that. When he started off and he was hanging with the pro pitching because I didn't know what to expect after the quick ascension, from high A last year all the way up to finishing the year AAA. But once he recoiled, once they did the right thing and sent him back down, I thought, is this going to be a quick one? Reset him, bring him back up. And then it was not. He was down for over 200 plate appearances. But like you said, Ty, he was doing well. He's back up now. I'm assuming he's going to stick around for the rest of the year. I just think that this is going to be someone who is a slow-term project, but right now you can go and trade for an impact MLB bat because to your point, Ty, if you're willing to wait, like you're saying, he's going to be there in 2025 and beyond, you might be looking at somebody who's a legit, Michael Brantley's coming to mind, but I know you don't like that comparison. So let's go with not George Springer, but George Springer light, where you could see a lot of categories where he's helping you. But he's never been the stolen base guy, so I guess I shouldn't say that. I'll take it back immediately. Well, and the OBP is supposed to be his calling card. So if that's going to be it, then he's going to help you in points leagues also.
I think he's going to hit for a little power. Like I think he's 30 home run power. Like I think that's the 35 might be the peak. 30 is probably the reality. 25's the lower level. Here's what I've kind of picked up on over years here. Like the Cuban players tend to be a little slower to break out. Right? This is a pattern if you look closely that it seems to be consistent. Like if you look at say like the Dominican, right? They seem to be more instinctual hitters, right? They're just better prepared when they reach the pros. Cubans less so, right? So like that's a trend here that I've watched for a while. And Colas is a guy that I think has all the tools. He's making good swings. He's just not on the pitch, right? So that'll change, and I'm not worried even for a second. So I'm with you though. If you're in a run, like he's definitely going to get you a haul. So you could definitely improve your playoff chances if that's the move you need to make. So again, roster dependent, but I'd be holding him if I can. Next on the list is a guy that we've been controversial about, Robbie. I'm in on Veen still. Like I still think Zach Veen is going to be a guy in Colorado. Yeah, it's a little slow. Cool. Whatever.
A little slow. He's got a 209 average with 2 dingers and 200 at bats in Double A.
22 stolen bases in 172 at bats. So there's upside here still. Right? Like that's for those of you that can do the math, like that's a lot. That's 60 stolen bases, almost 70 in a full MLB season, right? So is he going to steal 70 at the pro level? No, he's not. But 50 is very real, 40 is very real. And there's only a handful of those guys. So this type of player is going to get more valuable. Like there is still a can this guy make more contact question, Robbie? Like that still is the question. But I have faith in the Colorado Rockies front office to get this done.
Yeah, I know you're lying to me now.
Joking. Yeah. I'm joking.
I know you're lying to me now.
I do think he will figure it out. And the thing that I'm most excited about, Robbie, is when he played in the fall league around really good players, he showed up. Like, and that's the thing that, like, for me, I'm seeing there's bubbles of success in the rest of it. There's 15 home runs in 21, 12 in 22, and then 11 again last year, or 12 last year, sorry. So, like, there's enough here for me to get excited about a guy that's still just 20, right? 21 or whatever he is. Like, there's still 20. Lots of development here. So I'm not ready to get off this ship yet. The tools are there. And I think part of what you're seeing with the batting average is the Rockies saying, listen, kid, you can do all these things, but if you continue to swing like this, they're just going to blow heaters by your hands. And, he's not Bryce Harper. He's not the ability to get his hands, but his swing's very similar. But he's not the same player. So I think they're making adjustments here, Robbie, and that's why I'm saying stay in on this one, because I really believe he'll come around. And keep in mind, Mickey Moniak's minor league numbers looked an awful lot like this, right? And so that's something like when you look at these things, like don't give up on these guys too early, because these are very, very real things that you can see if you watch the patterns.
So I am in the sell camp on Veen, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that out of the draft, he became one of the first guys, like before the J2. Well, this was like, I guess, the year or two after everyone just started, drooling over the J2, the 16-year-old J2 guys that were picked. What was the next hot, fun thing to do? It was to fall in love with the highly drafted high school outfielders in the MLB draft. Veen, Kelnick was the other one. And Kelnick, case in point right now, we're watching it happen. We had a hot start to the year. He is learning, and I don't even know if he's 1,000 MLB at bats in. Veen, I think, is in a similar situation where he was overhyped so badly that when it came around to first-year player drafts, he was like a top 3 pick, even though he was 9th in that draft, plus the J2 class. And I remember saying, Colorado signed a guy out of the J2 who I think is going to be equally as good. And he's working his way through, very much like Zach Veen right now. And it's different because Veen has all eyes on him. And there's so many other players who don't have that problem. Now, Veen, obviously an elite base stealer, but elite base stealing only gets you so far. He's got to be, at minimum, a superior defender to be out in Colorado. And this is slow burn. But I am saying I would make the trade. I've got him in a league. I used a first-round pick in a dispersal draft, I think, to get him because I really, really wanted to see if he was lightning in a bottle or if he was worthy of a dump and trade. I'm on the dump and trade train now.
Well, and the big thing to keep in mind here is that he's having or he had season-ending surgery here on his wrist. So again, we've talked about hand injuries before being a huge discount on power. So I love this as a buy low, Robbie. Like I think he's going to be one of the best buys you can make in the next 8 months because you're not going to see a healthy Veen. And what people have in their recency bias is, listen, this guy can't hit worth crap. And I'm willing to trade him now. So he's got first round upside still. I think he's got 30 home run power in there. I don't think that's the kind of player they'll make him into be, but I think it's in there. So just, I wouldn't give up. There's way too early to give up on him. And if you do have him in TDL, Robbie, you need to.
I'm currently looking at your roster right now, Ty. So
send him over.
This is how trades happen between Ty and I. As we record the podcast, one of us sees that we roster a player the other loves or loathes, and then we figure out a way in which to make a deal happen. And then people are like, "You guys trade a lot between each other." Like, well, no shit. We talk a lot. So
well,
the next
it makes it easy though when we disagree on so many players because it's like, I'll give you this guy.
You just told me how you feel about him. I'm, like the cards are on the table. So whereas a lot of the other times in your various leagues, what is it? It's like a couple of group me text back and forth or like a trade offer with a little message attached. Like, hey, I'm interested in this player. What do you want for him? And hopefully get a deal done. So yeah, with us, the barriers of discussion are much easier. I'm sure we'll get a deal done in the next 24 hours now. And he will become a Savannah Banana on your team, and he will leave my Depoto's Mariners as my team name is in that league. Next up, I'm sure we can agree on this one. Daniel Espino. Nothing Espino has done from the mound that is cause for him to become traded outside of get hurt. And I will target him as the new Brent Honeywell Jr. I do have multiple shares. I do have multiple shares. It's not his fault. He hasn't had bad performances. He is hurt. His body is letting him down. But even MLB.com, the website where they do the top 100 prospects, they've been pushing him back. Like 3 or 4 straight updates. He's moved outside of the top 10 where he was, I think, at the end of last year. And now he is somewhere, I think, around 50, 51. And he's nestled right beside I think it's another pitcher. I think it's Max Myers. He's right beside now because they're like, these are guys that are hurt. We don't know how they're going to be. Well, Espino's had so many injuries, Ty. I think it's time to move away in the sense that go get yourself some MLB players. And then if he comes around in, say, 2024, 2025, you won't be regretting it because you could have 2 championships under your belt by then.
Yeah, I think this is that scene from Talladega Nights. Espino's just sitting somewhere going, don't you put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby, right? And that's exactly when you mention him in the same breath of Brett Honeywell, like that is a dagger to the leg.
Honeywell's about to, if he hasn't by the time this comes out, he's about to exceed rookie eligibility. All right, he will have pitched more than 50 minor league innings major league innings between Oakland and the Padres. And although the year started better than it's currently going for him, he is in a bullpen. So, I don't want Daniel Espino to be in my 2026, 2027 bullpen for my fantasy team. I want, name your guy as part of a deal that I trade Espino and someone else. Earlier this year, Ty, I traded him and Brady House, and I got back Juan Soto. That was one that I got in just in time before the Espino injury. I think it was actually one more player was in that deal, but I got Soto back. On the Soto slow start, I made a deal within the first 10 days of the season, and I'm very happy with that. I got Soto for 5 years, and the guy that gets him will get all Espino and House once they come up. They'll have him for 5 years. So
Well, I mean, Honeywell is almost sub 4 ERA. So I mean, considering where he's been,
Right.
that's
The
not the worst. He's a
struggles.
4.01. Like that's a step in the right direction. So
Does he
you know,
have
let's
any holds? Do you know? Like
I
by
do
the end
not.
of the year, he could be the closer if San Diego decides to really blow it up.
I think he
But
holds onto his elbow a lot to make sure it
oh,
doesn't
you
break
son
again.
of a bitch! You son of you got me. You button
Yeah,
hooked me.
that was a
Uh,
good one. But yeah, anyway, moving forward. I don't know who this guy is, so I'm gonna send him to you.
yeah, sure. Dalton
This is the
Rushing.
most raw prospect of all time.
No. This is the listeners out there will know. Dalton Rushing, a catcher with the Dodgers. He's at high A right now, and the funny part is that he's a top 3 catcher within the Dodgers, which like you'd be like, what the hell are you talking about? Well, like he's a top 3 because there are 2 guys that are right in and around with him. He's the oldest of them. The other, Diego Cartilla, that's the boy, right? That's the guy that's actually going to get the job. Problem is, there's one player like that we're not mentioning, and that's Will Smith, who's like one of the best or the best fantasy catcher. And he's with the big league club. So what the hell are they going to do with Dalton Rushing, a college drafted guy? Well, they're probably going to find a way to ship him out. They're not going to move him off, to catcher to first base if they think he's a legitimate catcher. But at 22 years old in high A, you're right where you should be if you think that, you're going to finish the year at double A, and then next year you're 23, you're going to go double A to triple A. You're on the cusp for 28, age 24. That would be a great break-in. The Dodgers typically don't do that. The Dodgers slow roll guys. They're 25, 26 years old. Talk to James Outman about how the Dodgers bring players along. But I think Rushing's like a trade target, a player that they might consider trading as opposed to a player they would covet, because they even have at high A, I've got to very quickly open up another window, and we know how well technology works with me. They've got 20-year-old catching prospect, who I mentioned on the last podcast, Theron Lironzo. Probably saying that wrong, but that's okay. Yeah, thank you. They've got him, who is amongst the nothing invested, so why not develop him type. And I just don't see where Dalton Rushing's going to come in and steal at bats, or steal, I guess, time. I don't know that we're going to see Dalton Rushing in a Dodger uniform, and I'm not interested in holding on to him, but he is getting hyped right now. He is really moving up. Like, people are forgetting that he's 22, and there's Diego Cartilla behind him, and there's Will Smith at the MLB level. This is one of those situations where if by chance you roster him, he would have been one of the top 4 guys off your draft board for catchers last year. Kevin Pareda with the Mets was another guy who was getting drafted super high, and I just didn't understand it. I'm like, do people forget that the Mets are already set with their future catcher? I don't know where they think Pareda is going to fit in. This is just a prospect who's going to just regress as far as the rankings go. Cash in on him now. Go get you some good young 25, 26-year-old starting pitcher for the fantasy owner out there who for some reason wants to collect catchers. Just make that deal.
I agree. And this last group here is interesting because you have some upside here, like some real upside to this group, right? And you've got a range of prospects, has-beens, and whatnot. But you've got Brooks Lee, Marco Luciano, and Jackson Chourio, who I believe is actually listed as a shortstop. Is he not?
No, he's an outfielder. Chourio's an outfielder. Yeah. The reason I know that guy is because he's a center fielder and he's solid defensively. But
so he's listed as a second baseman, right fielder, center fielder on Baseball Reference.
Baseball Reference, yeah.
Yeah.
They're like the Yahoo of position eligibility. If you've played a game there, they don't want to be told that they didn't have it included. So at least they're not a fantasy site. Baseball Reference is an actual baseball stat site, which we respect. And if they'd like to sponsor us and make this Baseball Reference Dingers podcast, we are available for negotiations.
I think we could really do that, honestly. They need to hit us up. So if you're listening, let's make that happen. But I mean, for me, this is 2 out of 3 for me that I'm in on. Brooks Lee, Chourio, I'm in on both. I'm 100% out on Luciano. I'm not buying there.
Okay, so we can agree on Luciano. Let's get him out of the way. He's the one thing, prospect fatigue, right? That's the big thing. He's been around a long time, and he didn't continue to excel at the level he had at the Dominican and then into, rookie complex and A-ball. And then he's fallen into some tough times. And I think as he's aged, as his body has grown, he has not met and matched and developed at the same rate that everybody expected.
I think he'll develop okay. I think there'll be a little bit of a rebirth here at some point. My big issue here is ballpark and team around him. I just think like the next 5 years for him don't look strong because the organization doesn't look strong. And that's the big part there. Like I like Brooks Lee a lot. Like I like Royce Lewis a lot. Like I like what Minnesota can be. I think they have an advantage over a lot of teams, very much like San Francisco, in the ability to go sign starting pitching free agents. So they only need a couple to be entering into the conversation. But they've got enough tools there to put a roster together, and they continue to have a weak division and will have a weak division for the foreseeable future until Detroit puts it together. So I like Lee to move quickly. I think we'll see him next season at some point towards the end of the year. I wouldn't say any time earlier than that, but I do think we're going to see him in that timeline. So that one's there. I don't know if you feel differently, Robbie, but I'm in on that one for sure.
I'm more confused by Brooks Lee's position within the depth chart. And we've seen Minnesota move everybody around to try to make things happen and create at bats. But we've also seen Minnesota not be able to finish off the development of highly touted prospects, including Lewis, who, he's looked good in pockets, but very much like the history of Minnesota. The players that look good get hurt, and the players that look like crap end up Oakland Athletics. Hello, Brent Rooker. So I'm out on Lee based on organizational development and the fact that he's come into a position at shortstop that I believe Royce Lewis is supposed to have. So I don't know how Minnesota's going to fit him in.
Royce is going to play second, I think. That's my take. I think we'll see Brooks play shortstop. I think Carlos Correa is going to play, if not shortstop, third. I think, Correa is the default shortstop. He's a good shortstop, and I think it's going to take an injury to move him off of that. But I think we're seeing it. I think we're seeing the deterioration and the reason he had so much contract issue this offseason for the purpose of longevity. And I think he probably said in those conversations, like, listen, I'll come back here if you give me the money, and I'll move to third if you give me the money. But I just don't see how that conversation would have went any different than that, if I'm 100% honest with you.
Okay. The other one is Chourio, and highly coveted. Again, I think this is an unfortunate thing where like a J2 guy is just getting hyped beyond belief. Yes, he's at AA and he's 19, but he's not dominating. He's just playing at it. And credit to him for doing it at that age. That is awesome. But that does not mean you are Julio Rodriguez in waiting. That does not mean you are Ronald Acuna Jr., Juan Soto. Like, you are just managing to play at that level. And I think he's been hyped so much. Like, I just noticed tonight, because I looked before we started recording, he's number 2 on MLB.com's top 100 prospects, which is not a reference for fantasy, but it is what we've talked about it so much. People will look at the list and be like, oh, like he's a really highly touted prospect. Okay, so that means he's got a lot of value. Well, they're not listing based on much. Like we've talked before about how we're not sure how they come up with that list, like who it is that's officially doing those things. They have various people that report on the teams, and we don't know, if is it scouts, is it whatever, because they just do the kind of like, how in some processed foods ties it just says spices.
Yeah,
like MLB, like that that envelope of spices, and any spices included among spices, it just could say writers or scouts, and we have no idea what the hell is it. Like, under 12 scouts that are making these lists, and they're like, Jackson Chourio looks really good. I don't buy it. Like, I do roster him in a league. I signed him as a J2 whatever year it was that I took a huge stab. I think it was 2019, where I just took a huge stab on a whole bunch of J2 guys that it looked like they had potential hit tools, and Chourio was amongst them. Gabriel Gonzalez was in that same group with me. And I Starling Aguilar with the Mariners was one of the big guys that year. Well, there's been other players like Chourio who've come to the top, but I'm not thinking he's going to change the game. And Milwaukee's got a lot of outfielders they're going to give shots to, in addition possibly to continuing to bring in borderline outfield veterans because they want to win. And I don't know that the deck's going to be cleared for him, but if his value is so damn high right now, I would not fault anyone who has him, like myself, and is looking to make an impact trade for him. In one league, I was looking to get Trey Turner. I think we talked about this on a previous podcast, but he wanted Chourio and Kobe Mayo in that deal for the rest of the season, Trey Turner and next year. But Turner has a very high cost. I didn't want to absorb the cost, and he wouldn't pay any of the money, so I just walked away from that deal. But Chourio is could get you an actual league winner right now. I highly recommend everybody who's got him goes out and looks for that league winner.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Like I'm with you. The only thing that scares me with Chourio, and the only thing, is the contact tool, right? So we haven't reached the level in minors where the average can dip a little bit here. So I think that's the thing that scares me the most with him. But beyond that, the tools are all there, all off the chart, and very, very high upside. So the hit tool is very concerning, and that's the thing I'm going to be watching for the next 6 to 18 months for sure with him. But for me, it's Brooks Lee of the three is the first one, and then Chourio, and then Luciano for me. So that's the way I see it.
Okay, well, there you go, everybody. This was a long one,
Yes,
but hopefully you're more smarter now, technically speaking.
Yep, smart. Yeah, no, it definitely, there's a lot here. I mean, we covered a lot of like indie, ways to look at these things, and this is a tough topic, right? This is where people are looking for advice, and this is why we spend a little time trying to help you guys. So we appreciate y'all being here. It's been Rob and Tyler here on Dingers.